More than half of sneakerheads are willing to overlook the comfort of their shoes just to have a pair that doesn't show any creases. And even worse, millions of sneakerheads are ready to turn their Air Force Ones into giant bricks to prevent them from creasing. Seriously, no joke, that's literally what the bros lost in the rabbit hole who buy crease protectors do. Looking like ducks over here. Creases on shoes. It's like a total mind-boggler that has forever changed the sneaker game. The old days are over. We're all brainwashed now. For those who aren't into this and don't quite grasp the magnitude of it, imagine for some sneakerheads, seeing this kind of thing is almost as painful as watching a guy take a massive acrobatic nut shot. And I'm not even exaggerating. So whether you know absolutely nothing about this crease obsession in the sneaker world, or you're fully immersed in it, let me tell you everything you need to know about the reason behind those creases on your shoes, where this obsession comes from, and how an entire industry capitalized on it by creating some questionable shoes and even shadier accessories. We'll also explore the solutions available if you're really fed up with creases, but most importantly, we're here to make it clear to the most die-hard crease-obsessed dudes, bear with us here, but creases on shoes, well, they're often a good thing. And let me explain to you why.
Hello guys!
New video. Today, we're going to talk about creases. Speaking of creases, we're bending over backward to bring you masterclass videos every Sunday. So maybe it's time to hit that subscribe button, and while you're at it, the like button too. It's free.
Well, I'm waiting for your fucking response. Are you just not gonna say anything, dumbass?
Well, creases on our sneakers absolutely annoy all of us, or almost all of us, but it wasn't necessarily the case 50 years ago. Back then, we didn't have sneaker shields or anything like that. But let me tell you, these kinds of products arrived much earlier than you might think. So, to understand how we became so obsessed with creases, we did our research on this weird-ass phenomenon. And as usual, to understand all this better, we'll have to give some historical context. Historically speaking, this phenomenon took its time to develop, partly because, as you know if you've been following the channel since the beginning, the very first sneakers in the early 20th century were mainly made of canvas. So, no leather creases, simpler, right?
Come on, man, that's too easy!
To get sneakers entirely made of leather, we had to wait for the leather version of the Pro-Keds, released in 1949. Before that, well, leather sneakers weren't a thing at all back then. But it'll quickly continue with a pair you probably know very well by now. Well, just like that, you might not necessarily recognize it, but it was indeed the Adidas Samba, which arrived a year later in 1950. Look at how the sneaker game doesn't exactly move forward. It's more like taking a step back year after year. The trendy pair of the moment is a vintage gem from the 1950s.
I like this shirt, it's sweet, huh?
It definitely is.
Later on, we saw a succession of leather models like the Onitsuka Tiger Mexico 66, Adidas Superstar in the late 60s, and Nike's Cortez in 1972. But even though leather sneakers were already becoming more popular, and even if it was higher quality leather at the time, they were already creasing. We were still in a time when absolutely no one cared about creases in their shoes. They were just sports shoes. You grabbed your Cortez for 20 bucks, wore them for running or walking, and that was it. For the crease obsession to arrive, we had to wait for Nike's massive marketing efforts in the mid-80s, but also the interest of street culture in the United States, which turned basketball shoes into positional goods. If you had the latest Jordan or brand new Air Force One, you were someone. These shoes, which were once simple basketball shoes, became a culture, and partly thanks to them, you're all so obsessed with sneakers. What started on the basketball court and in the streets continued to grow in the following years in American pop culture, with rap music videos or movies like the one with the Jordan 4 in Do the Right Thing. Obviously, how not to mention Nelly's iconic video where he basically turned his whole video into the biggest ad ever made for the Air Force One and got absolutely $0 for that.
Benevolence! Beyond reason!
This push into pop culture had Nike's fingerprints all over it. That's why when we talk about creases on a pair of shoes, it's almost always a Jordan or an Air Force One. It was part of their strategy to feature their products in films, but they didn't create this craze out of thin air. They capitalized on a movement that was already there, and they showcased all these pairs as beautiful objects you could totally flex with. And like any beautiful object, it had to be perfect. This obsession with creases, it's clearly due to the change in status of our sneakers, which were no longer purely utilitarian as they were in the beginning. Unfortunately for those who flex with their pairs, well, they're still just shoes. You can hardly keep them pristine if you actually wear them. That's why, even back then, they had to get creative to avoid showing off sneakers in terrible condition. Because as much as basic white chicks today might think that beat-up Air Force Ones are cool, you were kinda seen as a slacker in those days. And actually, that's still the case, to be honest. The richest, the big shots who were rolling rolling in dough, they change their shoes every day. That's actually what several wealthy rappers do even today, like Dr. Dre, who literally wears his Air Force Ones only once before tossing them. For the less fortunate, there were plenty of tricks. Some would use a clothes iron on their pairs to get rid of the creases, but before that, they'd put pieces of cardboard in the toe box to make it stiffer and less prone to creasing. They'd even double up on insoles to compress the foot and keep the toe box ultra rigid, or they'd put a second balled up sock in the toe box. Those were the ancestors of crease protectors. The real crease protector we all know didn't show up until 2006 with a brand called Sneaker Shield. It quickly became a small success, amplified by e-commerce and Chinese websites that sold millions of these plastic pieces. And, well, I might not personally recommend it. Apparently, according to people who have tried the product, 80% of them find it uncomfortable. But there's a small minority that likes it and is matrixed enough to accept the discomfort. Well, I mean, why not, I guess? The arrival of the crease protector and, more importantly, its success set off a snowball effect. We saw the emergence of several brands or improbable objects for sneaker care, or at least to give the impression that they don't age, like plastic protectors to shield your soles, or even bits of fabric to prevent you from removing the Nike logo from your insole. I mean, seriously, they thought of protecting every millimeter of your pair. But what does Nike think about all of this? And what could they do to help us avoid creases? Because after all, they're the ones making the shoes. Well, they're well aware of it, as we saw with the Air Force One Fresh, which was supposed to be a more durable version, and apparently, according to the Rose Anvil YouTube channel, it's not necessarily amazing. Maybe we should try to do better. Nike doesn't really aim to limit creases on a pair. Their motivation is all about making money. So, no matter what you do with your Nike pair, if you wear them for 3 months, they'll start looking pretty beat up. And oddly enough, it's often worse than with Adidas or Puma. You almost wonder if they do it on purpose. The reason, as you might guess, is the choice of materials they use. They tend to use rather questionable materials. We see this with what they call Nike fly leather. And when you read Nike's description, it sounds like a revolutionary material. But when you understand what they're talking about, it's a bit less impressive. It's basically scraps of leather that are no longer usable and would normally be thrown away. These scraps are mixed together with a binder to create a uniform material, which is then treated and covered with a plastic veneer. Of course, Nike loves to talk about it as recycling and reducing the environmental impact of leather production, but well, it's mostly because it's much cheaper than real leather. We saw this in our video about the prices of your sneakers. On millions of pairs, it's hundreds of millions of dollars saved, and it's also perfect for an industrial giant because you end up with a standardized product, whereas natural leather can sometimes have imperfections, like everything in nature. And that's not ideal for a multinational that wants everything standardized. This fly leather, it's more or less like the particle board in your IKEA furniture, which is a mix of whatever looks vaguely like wood glued together. It's also like the hot dog you buy at Walmart or the chicken nuggets at McDonald's, which are made from random bits of mechanically separated meat glued together with lots of chemicals that are obviously great for your health. Otherwise, they wouldn't sell them.
You thought you ate that?
It's a low-quality material, but the advantage of this leather wrapped in plastic is that it becomes stiffer. As we saw in the Dunk comparison, it's counterintuitive, but the more plastic there is, the less likely your pair is to show any creases, at least for the first few weeks or months if everything goes well. But pretty soon, this plastic starts to give way, and that's when your pair starts to really look worn out. But fortunately, Nike has a solution for you if you're tired of creases. They suggest you to buy a new pair. So, while you might be fed up with creases, you shouldn't be, because that's what makes your pair comfortable. It adapts to your foot. We clearly saw this in the crash test of the two Dunks. It's basically parts of the leather that have become more bendable and stretched based on how you walk. That's why you've probably heard your folks, who had real leather shoes back in the day, talk about breaking in their shoes to make them more comfortable.
See, back in my day, I was never musty.
It's basic math. A leather pair, even if it's Nike's questionable semi-leather, if you've been wearing them for months, they'll always be more comfortable than your new pairs. And that's why we all have a beater that we wear 24/7. The pair has adapted to our feet. Now, we can totally understand that the weird creases on Dunks or Air Force Ones might put you off. One solution, if you want to stick with leather, could be to opt for premium genuine leather. Of course, there will always be creases on your pair if you actually wear them. That's inevitable, but it won't look like a crushed soda can. For example, if you check out pairs like the Represent Apex, a premium pair made in Portugal, secondhand on Vinted, they age much better than the Air Force Ones. You can also check out this pair of Air Heats, also made in Portugal with premium Italian leather that one of our guinea pigs tested, and when I saw how it looked, I took it personally. We're not far from disrespect here.
What's this?
This isn't some sneaker cleaning video where the pair was quickly smeared with dirt before the shoot. No, this pair has been worn non-stop since November, every single day, with no mercy. Look at the soles, look at how the inner mesh got torn. No, this pair went through it.
This doesn't look too good,
Patrick.
In short, you can see that the pair has been through the ringer. It's seen everything. Snow, rain, scorching heat, but it's never seen a shoe tree in its life. And naturally, it has creases, but they're just wrinkles, not weird deformations that make the pair look hideous. So, premium leather could be a good alternative, and a very good one if you take care of it properly, unlike this savage. The other option, if you're really deep into the crease matrix, is to do what Nike suggests. Buy new pairs every 2 months. It's good for the economy, I guess, but in the end, it'll probably cost you more, and you'll end up with less comfortable pairs and less visually appealing creases. If you compare the swoosh taken from an Air Force One to a similar piece of real leather by bending them, you can quickly see that the reaction is completely different between the two. Real leather deforms less. That's why pairs made with premium leather don't have atrocious creases like that. They have creases, just nowhere near as bad. I mean, that's a dub if you ask me. Another option that might appeal to you is to exclusively wear pairs that don't have leather toe boxes. It could be the Superstar with its plastic reinforcement, mesh pairs like the Ultra Boost, Yeezy 350 V2, Air Max, Salomon, Asics, and all those styles. There's plenty to choose from. And if you're really obsessed with Jordans, Dunks, and Air Force Ones, you can go for the Flyknit version or something like the Dunk Jumbo. But you know, you gotta have a thing for that kind of stuff. So, in short, you have to accept that your pairs will crease. We get the obsession, but you have to keep in mind that they're still shoes, made in the depths of Vietnam with materials that are literally waste. So, I think even the ugliest of your feet deserves a little more respect than repurposed garbage. Please don't hurt them for your kicks.
To find love in the UK. How many people stop my page? When will I get paid? I'm still stuck in my ways. I go back on Wednesday. See me, you are not the same. You go back, you spend it on yeah. I go back, I'll spend it on me. Like where you were, I'm in Paris. See the seasons are changing. And these beds start raining. No